Welcome to the October update for SpaceAgeCollapse. This month we're doing something a little different. I'm going to talk about some of the work that we've been doing to get ready for our first playable, and one of that is preparing our marketing materials. So what does that entail? Well, that's our website. Right now it's in a little state of needing a lot of repair. So the question that comes to my mind is, do I spend a lot of money on a template that I need to rejigger to get to look the way I want it to and hope that it works out? Or do I spend my time getting familiar with HTML again? I've done a lot of HTML in my career, but mostly from a back-end perspective, and it changes a lot. So yeah, I definitely find web development to be painful, and I was thinking about, is there a way that we could sort of do it better? Now, I started off when all you really needed was a text editor and a browser to get started. So using old Nazca Mosaic, a text editor, maybe BBEdit, maybe something else, and, probably on top of this, using Photoshop to cut up your images and that sort of thing. But everything sort of changed a lot from then. So we just sort of live in this state of a progressively complex tech stack that seems to get more complex every single year. So we start with HTML, which had some sort of limited ways of changing the font and the style of text. And then people are like, maybe we separated this. Maybe we separate the visuals from the content. Okay, so the CSS thing. Okay, yeah, that's cool. It also allows us to get down file sizes. We'll just deliver this one style sheet down to the browser. It'll be all great. And then JavaScript comes along and goes, what if we started dynamically spawning things in? So we can have these dynamic sites. And then people realize that browsers in the very early couple of years are very, very inconsistent about how their DOM was handled and how you communicated with it. So we had jQuery. So people were learning this. Then cell phones came along, and then we were like, oh, crap, we need to really have our websites work on both cell phones and desktops, all of which have various different screen sizes. So we have the whole world of responsive web, media queries, changing styles based off of how big the screen is, showing hiding elements. And then we sort of had the rise of the web designer, where people started looking into sort of code reuse in a way. So we had NPM, we're pulling in packages for JavaScript, pulling in features for that, just sort of aggregating collections of CSS, JavaScript across the internet and hoping that you can get it bundled together into your site and get to work. Then we had sort of like rudimentary websites weren't really looking good on mobile, so we really wanted to make something that was more interactive, had sort of a real app sort of feel. So we had React, Angular, and that's all spilled into the whole most app developments on desktop are now all web development. And again, people are looking at ways to improve their workflow, ways to fix things. We have the whole world of CSS compilers like SCSS and Sass, where people are like, wouldn't it be cool if we could specify like a constant for a color so we could use the same color in all these elements? Well, before, people had to rewrite that same color over and over again or just duplicate styles. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of changes right now that I'm completely unaware of because I've kind of been out of that scene for the last 3 years. The one thing that also always bugged me about development for the web was that nothing was really cohesive. So we have our HTML, which is pulling in these CSS files or doing some CSS inline, which is then also including some JavaScript, which may optionally include things in your site. And then we have a whole images directory where we probably have a separate directory for our thumbnails, our full resolution images, all of which someone's gone in Photoshop and gotten to be the correct dimensions. So when you look at HTML, you really don't have a clear idea what's going on. There's all these sort of things going in, adding to it. So it's only really apparent when you go into the inspector inside the browser and just look at it. And when it tells you, okay, yeah, these styles are being applied, this is the image that's being pulled in. So everything's sort of been shotgun blasted throughout the repo, when it would be really great to just be able to look at something and be like, oh yeah, that's what shows up on screen. So I decided, maybe it's time to make something. So I'm thinking about my goals. Like, what would make creating a website for a game, like a lander like that, or I'm often in a situation where I've had bands where I want to create like a list of albums, a list of shows. Um, like being able to start with some sort of template that would be great, and then customizing it would be really cool. So I would love to be in a situation where perhaps designers were creating a description of, like a design for an album, and which had various sections. Maybe it's like who was on it, the songs on it, that you could just sort of like copy paste out the elements that you wanted. So it'd be cool if we could copy and paste things again. I'd also love for like complexity to be encapsulated. Like, so instead of having to look all over the place to figure out what styles are being applied to the element, it could just be there. And maybe we could reduce a whole bunch of the verbosity, because we wouldn't need to specify classes for everything. If we could just keep something in like a tight little package, then it'd be also awesome to eliminate a bunch of tedious rote work. Like, I don't really want to have to go and manually resize images or tweak them for thumbnails. I really despise fav icons and just setting those all up. It'd be cool if this could just handle it, or at least come up with like a really good approximation. So here's the approach. So what I'm basically running with is an HTML-like syntax. So roughly it's going to look like XML. It's going to be a little bit more strict in terms of what it accepts and what it does not. It's going to support custom tags, so we can sort of have reusable components. So if I was like on a band website, I could say this band had 3 albums, and maybe I could make a custom tag that was for an album, that you could just put 3 of them, fill out the details as attributes, and have it there, instead of sort of copying and pasting this huge block of HTML with CSS and just trying to find the right text to change. So there's sort of like get away from a lot of the copy paste that is in standard web design. Also, I want to add scope CSS. So sort of what I was talking about before, being able to say, just apply the CSS to this element alone or its children. I know a bunch of other web tech has done this, so this isn't anything new. Probably a lot of the ideas here aren't anything new, but I just want to wrap it into a package that sort of fulfills my needs and makes me go a little less insane making websites. So I want the ability to export this HTML syntax to actually raw HTML. So a lot of this stuff that I want to design is marketing, right? That's sort of the theme of this whole thing. And I basically want to be able to just upload to an S3 bucket, and validate my CloudFront distribution, and have it there. Or heck, even just upload the data to a raw web server and just have it work. So similarly, since this syntax isn't quite HTML, I can't just use the browser to debug it, but I would like to do something like a self-hosted server, similar to how PHP and some other languages do, where you can just say, host this directory on this port, and I can work interactively in the language, see a whole bunch of error messages if I do something wrong, and just work with it in its raw format without having to build out to HTML first. So let's take a little look at what the syntax is going to look for this new program. So let's start with custom tags. So the core of this is a tag. It has a name. We can use attributes that have been specified at that name to do substitutions. We can also optionally choose to embed the children from the tag definition into the body of this. So if we look at the bottom, here would be me using this something cool tag after it was defined. Tag can be defined anywhere in a page. So here I'm specifying a custom attribute, my attribute name, and then the body of that would be substituted where that core children tag is. So this would just render out HTML. So you can do sort of ideally make like reusable components out of this. So let's talk about scope CSS. So very simple, looks very much like a style tag. Syntax is a little rough right now, but basically we'll set up the CSS so that it's scoped only to that div. You don't have to specify a class on that div. You don't have to specify an ID on that div. That CSS will just be applied. Similarly, for responsive design, we can set up one of these CSS blocks to only work with particular media queries. So this is a lot of the time we're dealing with things like the max width or the min width of an element and being able to sort of change things depending on the resolution of the device. And then finally, what it's talking about just sort of doing like automatic tasks. So this tag right here, the image tag, can actually do resizing for you. So this won't actually resize the source image, but we'll make a copy of that into a separate directory within the project that is sized down to the dimensions. In this case, it's 100 by 100 pixels using a linear algorithm. The plan is to add more algorithms, to maybe add more ways to manipulate this or preserve aspect ratios. But I want to start building up more tags like this that just sort of take the edge off programming. So things like being able to specify placeholders from the beginning, so you can sort of design the layout of a site, say like, okay, these images are going to be this resolution, put a temporary file to disk that you could then sort of overlay the final image onto. Now, so that's sort of the high level of it. So this exists right now in prototype form. This is definitely going to change, but you can check it out at github.com/igtristan/page. And there's a separate repo there called page_examples, which I'm going to start filling out with some examples of the site using this new sort of tag structure. Right now I have one that is just using Bootstrap 5, one of their album examples. We'll put more in there, and hopefully soon I will have my site redesigned using this tech and start adding more features to this GitHub. So yeah. Anyways, if this is something you're interested, as always, like, subscribe, tell a friend. I think this is a cool piece of technology, and if anyone has any suggestions of stuff to add, please add it to the comments below. Well, thank you again. Have a great day.